Guys, it's Karalynn, and welcome back to the podcast. And today we have another episode about mechanics liens in a particular state. So today's episode is about liens in Kansas and who can have lien rights and how to file them. So the general rule in Kansas is that anyone can have lien rights in Kansas. Anyone who uses labor or material to improve a piece of property can have lien rights, right? Except for material suppliers to subcontractors. So we're talking like fourth tier material suppliers do not have lien rights. Okay. But the general rule is everybody does, except you can't go too far down the chain. Engineers and architects have lien rights, even if they didn't actually go out and physically improve the property, right? Material suppliers must prove that the material was used at the project. Delivery is not enough. You actually have to prove that the materials went there or show that they were used in the project or were used up in the building of the project. Okay. There's really not a whole lot of warning pre-lien notice requirements. There is a requirement that a subcontractor or supplier on a residential property has to give a warning statement to the owner and general contractor before they file a lien, right? So if you're on a residential project, you do have to send a warning statement before the lien is filed. So I would always send that early, right? Okay, so the timeline for general contractors, if you're hired directly by the owner, you have 4 months after last work to file your lien, right? Subcontractors and material suppliers have 3 months after last work to file their lien. So, but the interesting thing about Kansas is that the lien will only be good for an amount owed if that amount is still owed to the general contractor. So meaning if the owner has paid everything to the general contractor already, and even if you filed the step to have a valid lien, you won't have a valid enforceable lien. And so that's why there's a deadline there of the 15th of the 4 months after you supplied labor or material for a general contractor, or 90 days for subcontractor or material supplier. That is the deadline, right? But you're running the risk that if you wait that long, that the owner has already paid everything to the general contractor. And if that happens, even if you file a valid lien, you're not entitled to the money. So that's why I say as soon as you know that there's an issue, move forward with the lien process. So like on a residential project, you would send the warning statement and then file the lien, right? You can't file it. There's no penalties for filing it early. There's only penalties for filing it late. So as soon as you know that there's an issue, send a notice. And, I know the state doesn't require a notice, but I was still out of good practice. Of course, the whole purpose of liens is to collect the money that you're owed, right? And so if you can send notice and make phone calls early on saying, hey, I haven't been paid, I'm going to file a lien, you're more likely to get paid, right? And let them know. So there's no penalty for sending a notice that's not required, sending a notice early, making phone calls to the general contractor, the owner, letting them know that you're owed money, telling them, what's going on, find out if they've been, if they've paid the GC or the subcontractor or not. Right. So, always file early. As soon as you know there's an issue, don't wait. You shouldn't be waiting for 90 days for payment anyways. All right. The lien must contain a verification. That means it's got to say it's verified and be notarized, right? It's very important. All of these steps are hugely important, right? If you missed one, even one little step, the lien will be invalid, and it could be more dangerous than not having a lien at all. So make sure that you know what you're doing. If not, look to a qualified attorney. Like I said before, here at the Cromeens Law Firm, we do liens in all 50 states. So it's got to have a verification. It must have an itemization of the amounts owed. So like a statement, an invoice, kind of a description of the work that you've done and that you're owed money for. Must have the claimants, the person claiming the lien, name and address. Must have the legal description of the property. Must have the name and address of the owner. Must have the name and address of the general contractor, right? And if you weren't hired by the general contractor, it must also have the name and address of the person that hired you. So, and here's a tricky thing about Kansas is once the lien is filed, it must be personally served on the owner and the bank. So, if personal service can't be done, there are some exceptions for sending certified mail. I would, as practice, work on getting the lien filed, setting up, and you can use a private process server to send them, serve them with a notice of the lien, right? And then they file an affidavit that they sign it. The process server signs an affidavit saying that they serve the person with the lien. I would also send it certified mail so that there's a record that you've done it. The lien is filed in the clerk of the district court in the county that the property is located, right? And then the liens in Kansas are good for 1 year. And that's kind of common throughout most states. Most of them don't have shorter than a year, or usually it's 1 to 2 years, kind of depending on the property. And then if you don't file suit to enforce within that year, the lien expires, right? And it's no longer valid and enforceable. And then if you have to move forward with a lawsuit to enforce your lien, you are entitled to get your attorney's fees back. So do know that. You don't have to have an attorney to file a lien in Kansas. I highly recommend when you're filing a lien that you have it done by a qualified attorney. Some of the lien filer services that I've dealt with in the past or have seen liens filed on are not done right because liens are such a finite area of law and every state does them different, right? And knowing how to do them properly is hugely important. A lien, like I've said in the past, is huge leverage and a great way to make sure that you get paid, but it's got to be done right. And so, it's worth, especially if you're owed lots of money, worth $1,000 or so to get it done right. So that it's done right and your money's secured, right? So, make sure it's done right. And you can, if you're not in a hurry, you can let the lien sit for up to a year. A lien will stop from anybody from selling or getting a new note or refinancing. So if you file a lien and somebody's in, it's a new build, they're probably in construction financing. And so before they go to permanent financing, all the liens will have to be taken care of, right? And so if you're in that kind of situation, you file your lien, it might be the best decision to sit and wait for the lien, right? And not enforce the suit because, it takes time and money. And when you send these notices and you do these things, make sure you keep copies of everything. It's a great idea if you're sending something out certified mail to put the certified number on the letter itself of the certified number of the letter that's going out. So that way, if the green card doesn't come back, you can take that number and you can run it through the U.S. Postal Service's website, and it will track it for you, right? So that's always a great idea. Keep records of everything. Keep copies of everything. If you have an online software, you can just keep it in there. It makes our lives as attorneys much easier to try to enforce a claim if I have all the required documents. So if you have any questions about liens in Kansas or liens in any other state, like I said before, there's tons of episodes of other states on here. There are blogs coming up on my website monthly about each specific state. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and make sure that you have a consistent collection strategy that involves the lien rights in your state. All right, guys, thanks. I look forward to working with you. Thanks.